Today, I want to talk about CEOs, chief executive officers. Seems to be a lot of them nowadays, more than I've ever seen in my life. In fact, on LinkedIn, which is the social business networking site, where you're supposed to be able to make connections with fellow business people, maybe people that are in your same business. I think back in the '80s and the '90s, I think of like a bar, during happy hour, businessmen would go have a drink, go have a Harvey Wallbanger, and hand each other their business cards. That was business networking. At least that was an excuse for business networking. But nowadays, people are on social media, so and people are using sites like LinkedIn. And the one thing that I've noticed recently is like all the different people that I see on there, the majority of them, their title is CEO. And I just don't understand this. If you're the owner of a small mom and pop auto parts store, how are you a chief executive of anything? If you have four employees, how does that make you a CEO? Or we've diluted this word and its meaning so much that it really doesn't mean anything nowadays, right? If everybody's going around saying, I'm a CEO, what's there to aspire to? Because if anybody can just be whatever they want to be nowadays, what's the point? So we've watered this down so much to the point of, for me, I think of back in, was it the late '80s, early '90s, Cadillac came out with a car called the Cimarron, and it was going to be the everyman's Cadillac. But a Cadillac is supposed to be a car of prestige. It's supposed to be hard to obtain. Your goal and your aspiration is to aspire to own that car one day, right? It's a regal car, kind of like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. So if Ferrari and Lamborghini and Bugatti started making cars that were only $15,000, what would be the point? What would be the point for the owner who's spent $1 million on a car, who's like, well, God, if everybody else has one, my car is not special anymore, and it depreciates the value of that car, right? So if all mansions now were, just $100,000, anybody who's got a $5 million mansion, they've, lost their property value just now. So the same thing with these titles, chief executive. When you think of a major corporation like Shell or McDonald's or, or something like that, or Pepsi, those typically have a CEO. Um, and rightfully so, right? But back in the day, it used to just be that you were the president of the company, and then you had a vice president, or like maybe a senior VP, and then several VPs below him. And that really only started coming around in like the '90s and the early 2000s. Now you have corporations that have like 150, vice presidents. What's the point? So is it just, I can't give you a raise, but I'm going to give you a title. Um, so you can understand that. I mean, you would take that job, because hopefully you would get, some kind of maybe a bonus or something like that if they were just giving you the title, but you're still working for a major corporation. So you're doing pretty well, right? But if you take like a fry chef at McDonald's and say, hey, we're going to make you the vice president of customer service. I don't know. Is this as ridiculous to you as it is to me? Because then I find myself having a difficult time trusting people now. Because if you're all CEOs, what's the validity of that? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, if you can just go around making up a titles, it's like a chiropractor's a chiropractor. If they go around telling people they're a doctor, well, it's kind of shame on them because we know you're just a chiropractor. So don't add anything more to it. Um, if everybody in the military is a general, what's the point? What's the point in moving up in rank and trying to aspire to something? So I just thought it was funny. I was on LinkedIn this weekend and, had made a couple of connections and saw a few different things on there. And it was just like CEO, CEO, CEO. And I'm like, how the hell are there so many CEOs in the world nowadays? And then I'm looking at their businesses and I'm like, this guy owns a single candy shop. And I'm being a little silly. They weren't that, but they were still very small businesses. This isn't like, Walmart or, or Target or something like that. These are just literally small single owner, small mom and pop, what we consider a small business, right? And so I would think like owner, at the very most president, but really just owner. You're the owner of something. Like I own my podcast. I'm not the CEO of some multimedia conglomeration. This is just a small podcast. Um, I don't profess to that it's anything bigger than that. I don't even think like Adam Carolla and Joe Rogan claim to be the CEOs of their corporations, right? Because they're not a corporation; they're just a podcast. No matter how many millions of followers you have, uh, unless you have like hundreds and thousands of employees, then you're not a executor of anything. You're not a chief over anything. So I don't know. I think people have just they've diluted this word so much that it doesn't even mean anything anymore to be a CEO, and that's pretty sad. Um, because then they don't have a CFO and a COO. Uh, so I don't know. What's your thoughts on this? I feel like with everything else that's going on in the world today, with the Rittenhouse trial and just everything else, I wanted to talk about something a little bit more lighthearted, but something that did still kind of I don't know that I would trivialize it, that it's not important, because I do think it's important, because this leads back to trust, and how do we trust people? Because if somebody's trying to pitch you something and they tell you they're the CEO of a corporation, and maybe they want to strike a deal with you or something like that, and you go, well, he's the CEO of a company, surely this guy's got to be legitimate, and then you find out he's just a huckster. That's pretty damning for you, and that's pretty sad. So I don't know. What's your thoughts? Leave a comment down below. I'd like to get to the bottom of this and see if we can't get people to start using just regular titles and stop being so damn grandiose with everything. Just be happy with what your position is, and you're doing good that you have a job. So anyway, again, leave a comment down below. And if you like my content, please hit the subscribe button. And I'll talk to you next time on the John Malone Show.